Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar on the keys to better screening questions. I'm Colson Stieber, VP of Business Development at Communications for Research. CFR works with other researchers to set up and manage the process of getting answers for primary research and provides the follow-through team to get the job done. We were founded in 1997 and are based in St. Louis. I've been with CFR for almost 4 years now, and I'm responsible for working with our customers to bring in about a third of the work that we do. Every year we manage data collection of over 600 research projects. For the most part, every research study has screening questions, and they are a piece of the puzzle we pay a ton of attention to in our business because it has such a big impact on our success. All that practice has definitely helped us develop many of our own ideas about how to set research up to succeed. A few quick things before we start. We are recording this webinar and we'll send it out to everyone. It will also be available on our website. You'll also see some other resources on the site, including an ebook on writing screening questions that includes a question template based on the best practices we're talking about today. Finally, we're going to have some time to answer questions you may have at the end of the webinar. You can either put questions in the chat and I'll answer them at the end, or just wait until we get to that point. We're going to spend the next 15 minutes or so covering the content, and I honestly have spent 15 minutes on the phone with 7 people talking about one screening question, and I've also had studies where clearly no more than 15 minutes was spent on all of the screening questions, and the whole project started out seeming like a failure because of it. So no matter what end of the spectrum you're on, hopefully what I have today will help you think through how to do your screening questions better. Before we have a person participate in the research we are doing, we need to be sure they are part of the target audience who we are doing research with. That means nearly all primary research begins with screening questions. So the simple topics that I have that I'm going to cover today is to keep screeners to 12 questions, answer the basic question of, if I were part of the target audience, would I know how to answer this question? And does the wording match the communication platform that I'm using to do my recruitment? So the first item is to keep screeners to 12 questions max. There's a phenomena in the world that if you add a screening question, a certain percentage of people will terminate on it. I don't know why. I put a lot of time into understanding what worked and what didn't work in the management of especially qualitative research. And once you get past 12 questions, you're often in a boat of having a very low incidence rate. And what happens is that maybe you only lost 2% of people on one question and you lost 20% of people on another question. But once your screening criteria start to get too long and you go beyond 12 questions, you almost always are in a low incidence situation where you're struggling to get the participants you need in an economical way. So the keys to getting yourself to 12 questions or less is to walk through your screener once you've typed up what you believe you're going to need as screening criteria, and say to yourself, what are truly the core criteria someone needs to meet to be included in this research. You have to eliminate redundancies in questions. If you ask someone whether they use a software program, and then later in the screener ask whether they use a computer to help manage their time, you are asking the same question twice in different ways, and somebody will terminate out because they'll misinterpret the question, but no matter what, you're wasting everyone's time that's involved. And that kind of comes into the quote of more isn't always better. Sometimes it's actually just more. They're called screening questions because they are meant to be sure that only the people included in the research are the ones that are part of your target audience. That does not mean more questions are better or even help you do a better job of making sure you are engaging the right person. You want the research to be inclusive of everyone that should qualify, not narrow the audience through screening so much that it is no longer representative of the group that you're trying to research. And often when you add in additional questions, what you do is you actually end up screening people out that should actually be included in the research. Point number 2 is to ask yourself the question, if I were part of the target audience, would I know how to answer this question? This is your one and only reminder to empathize with the people who are going to be answering your questions. By the time you have written a questionnaire, thought about the research, talked to countless people that may have been involved in the process in getting your research going, you have thought about this way too much. And the moment that you actually go live and put yourself out there and a study gets in front of a respondent, they are brand new to that conversation and they have never seen the questions that you're asking before. So you really need someone that is basically part of that target audience to be giving you feedback when you believe you have final copy ready for programming and sending out into the world. One thing that I said there was that is part of your target audience, because a big mistake that I see is that people say that, everything should be written at an elementary level that anyone can understand. And that's somewhat true in that we want to avoid research jargon that won't make sense to the outside world. But what's even more true is that if you make it sound too dumbed down and you're trying to engage a specific target audience within a B2B industry or a field that you're researching, and you sound like an outsider, they're probably not going to even be willing to answer your questions. So the best example I can think of for this is the first time I managed the data collection of a veterinary study. I had to call my client and have her explain to me what she was asking for and whether the respondent would understand the terms that she had been using. And there was 3 big lessons in that. If the person managing the data collection and doing the emailing or briefing the callers doesn't understand, they may make an error in how they manage the research. If there is any chance that anyone you are going to have enter the survey is not going to know what the terms are on the screen, then it better be because there is no way they should have been contacted. They do not qualify, and there is a way for them to get out. So there needs to be none, refuse, don't know options on those questions that are using inside terms to the industry so that you can get rid of the people who don't belong there. And third, if you are working to engage experts on a subject and do not show that you have any expertise yourself, they will abandon your survey. And it's not going to make sense to you why without getting some feedback from them. The third big lesson today is to ask yourself what communication method you're using and whether it matches what your wording is. So is the person going to answer these questions over the phone, online, or by filling out a piece of paper? To hit on the top level of the 2 most common methods of phone and online, when you're doing phone screening, you have to realize that it's a conversation. After you finish screening this person, you are either going to invite them to participate in research online, in person, on a webcam, or right then over the phone. Make sure that the information that needs to be collected to determine qualification is unbelievably clear. Then expect for the person doing the recruiting to have a conversation with the person to get them to do it. That means that it's just as important for the caller to understand who it is that they're supposed to be talking to as it is for the questions to be worded well. And a big way to know whether that is working is to make sure that you're getting feedback from the caller directly. More than just reviewing the data from the calling outcomes after the first few days, the person that actually heard what the person said on the other end of the phone needs to be part of the conversation about how to improve the conversation and get the right people to participate in the research. You're not going to get meaningful feedback from those callers, though, if you don't ask them really good specific questions about, this is what I'm looking for on this question. Could you write down any feedback that you get if someone gives you this specific answer? Would be a really good example. Switching over to online screening, when it really comes down to is the questions have to be extremely short and the answer categories have to make sense entirely on their own. Because what happens is if we ask very generic questions like age group and we write out an entire sentence, people skim the wording at the top and then they just choose an answer category from what's below. So it has to be extremely intuitive how things are set up. And there's an example on the screen here of a good age question to use. Again, getting feedback on an online survey from both the people who terminated and those that end up completing the survey about the survey itself when you are going out and doing a pre-test or a slow launch, it can be key to figuring out whether you're actually qualifying the right people and excluding the right people. We have a standard set of questions that we put in front of everyone that are the first 50 people to access an online survey and see whether and try and solicit some of that feedback about what their experience was with the survey itself. So to recap, by all means, you have to figure out a way to keep your screeners short. And anytime you start laying things out and you start seeing a 22 question screening criteria set, you should throw up huge red flags and start running the opposite direction. Point 2 was to make sure that the questions you're asking make sense to your audience. It is not good enough to simply write something at an elementary level or avoid research jargon. You have to go a step beyond that and actually show some empathy for the people that you're trying to talk to. And third, you want to tailor the wording to the method that you're going to be talking to people. In the phone world, everything is a conversation, and online, no one is taking the time to read the full question, and you better have extremely intuitive setup to how your questions work. Now I'd like to open it up to questions, and I'd be glad to go as specific as hitting on details of how to ask something that somebody has going on right now, or as broad as general rules that I use to assess screening criteria when I receive things from our customers.